So I remember the knot in my stomach that I had as I tried to convince myself that this guy that I had been so close with for so many years wasn't actually trying to steal everything that we'd built and that I had been building prior to this. I went to lunch and sat down across the table with him and we ate together. And I was sharing some concerns, but not really directly facing, like, I didn't flat out say, did you take all the money? I was just beating around the bush a little bit, saying like, this is what my plans are. This is what I'm going to do now. Now that I'm rebuilding X, Y, and Z, I'm going to need this much for payroll. My wife's a little bit kind of apprehensive, so I was trying to bring her into the story because this man came to my house on a daily basis, almost. I was in his house regularly. It's not like we were strangers by any means. So I'll need about just $600,000 brought over into this account that I can operate out of and just kind of have some autonomy with that. Get right back up and be on top again. He sat there and ate his food and was like, cool, right on, okay. It was casual, but it was kind of like that. Cool, and then okay. It wasn't like, okay, I'll make the transfer. And so the knot in my stomach tightened a bit. The next day, I got up, I checked the bank account balance. There was no money. I sent a text, hey, did you make that transfer? I don't see it coming through. No response. What's up with the transfer? No response. I know you're leaving town soon. Can you make that transfer so I can get going on everything that we discussed yesterday? And then he replied and said, I'm just on the tarmac. I'm about to take off to Hawaii. I'm not sure what you mean, but I'll get back to you later when I land. So he's not sure what I mean. And that's when I realized, and it hit me like a ton of bricks, that everything that I'd just done for the last 5, 6, 7 years, the crazy 100-hour weeks, the travel all over the world, everything was kind of falling apart right before my eyes. Now, I should have seen that a long time before that. I didn't want to see it because this was my friend. And he was kind of connected to the family. And there was all sorts of connections. And like I said, in my home all the time. This whole thing started many years before that. And in fact, it really started when I was a kid. Had a great family. I'm the last of 9 kids, the youngest of 9 children in the family. So I had a lot of older brothers and sisters, 4 of each. One of my older brothers was into Tony Robbins and things like that, and that's what really lit a fire inside of me. He bought Personal Power when it came out in 1985-ish or 8-ish, I don't remember. I was just a kid. I was like 8 or 10 years old, and he gave that to me, and I knew that it probably cost like $300 or $400 because I saw an infomercial for it, and I just couldn't believe that he would hand that to me and let me use it and listen to it as I wanted to. And I did listen to it, and I loved it. I thought one day it would be super cool to be like old banana hands and help other people to really unlock greatness and to achieve goals and dreams. And I started to dream a bigger dream because of that. And he would talk about him getting a helicopter license and landing his helicopter on top of buildings to go give a seminar speech. And I just thought, wow, this is pretty awesome. That's a thing? You could just have a helicopter and land on a building? And I'd never really... I mean, those are the first imaginations of my child mind that I recall. Or ambitions, rather. And then they started to become somewhat ambitions. Not all of them, but some of them started to light a fire in me. Having all those brothers and sisters, one thing that I remember taking away from childhood is they were all going into construction and blue-collar work and different things like that, working really hard, earning good money, making good, honest living, but they all told me, work with your brain, not with your hands. I'm tired. This is hard. So I did. My parents supported me, bought me a computer when I was, 10, and it was an old IBM, just ancient thing that hardly computed. But it was a cool thing to have that resource and start to learn some basic stuff about computers and to get comfortable with them, so I felt at ease. And that kind of fueled me trying to work more smart than hard, but you can't get a job using your brain too much when you're a young kid or a teenager. So I worked my way up through other jobs and learned how to work, and my parents always taught me how to have a good work ethic. I had great bosses who taught me a lot, from the catering company that I worked at. My friend's dad owned, and then later his brother-in-law bought from him. I worked there until I was 16 years old. From like 10, 11 years old, sometimes I'd work a little bit, to 16, where I was working more full-time, going to school. And then once I could drive, I got into other jobs like working in a gas station, working at a furniture store. Was able to get into kind of some management sort of roles in both of those, and was given a lot of trust by the owners, and I loved the lessons that they taught me and the trust that they put in me to be entrusted with so much of their business, especially now that I know what it took for them to build that business, and as just a dumb punk kid. That was really pretty cool of them. So even from my early years of having some of these ambitions to be a little bit more independent, maybe a little more wealthy too, I kind of like the idea of helicopter kind of wealth. It seemed pretty cool when I was the last of 9 kids, and everybody told me that I was spoiled, but I always thought, I probably was spoiled. But everybody told me that I was, and I always thought at the bottom of 9, as the 9th child, there wasn't anything left over for me to be spoiled with, but yeah, that's not true. So I always had ideas of wanting to have enough. That drove me to always want to work hard. I worked a lot of hours, even in high school. I got work co-op. I got out of school to work and got grades and credits for it. And I was able to make pretty good money for a high school kid. And I always had money in my pocket. That just made me feel like I'm not broke, I'm not poor, if I've got a couple $100 in my pocket at any given time as a kid. And I always did. That drive, it was a little short-sighted though. I wasn't very interested in school. I didn't want to go to college. I knew I could make good money working, and I just kept working. Some of those working environments and enough money in my pocket at any given time kind of put me in positions where there were some other choices I made as a teenager that were definitely not healthy. I started to mess around with drinking, started to do a little bit of drugs here and there, and then a little bit more, and I was going down a pretty rough path when my dad passed away when I was 20 years old. Totally unexpected. He was out on vacation visiting my sister, and he was gone. At the time, I was really not making great choices and doing way too many drugs, trying to live some fantasy of a life that I could do all that stuff and get away with it. And that changed my perspective on a lot of things, naturally. I was the only child in the family that wasn't married when that happened, so I moved back in with my mom to hang out with her and got my act cleaned up pretty quick. Just cold turkey, everything stopped, and I just shifted a lot. It gave me a moment to pause and really go inward, where I had tried to set up my first business before that, as I was trying to use drugs too. That didn't work out well. Filed bankruptcy, moved in with my mom, and was just a kind of a companion with her for a while as we mourned the passing of my dad. I spent a lot of time in reflection and introspection mode. I read books a lot. Like I would read, I didn't have a job. I wasn't contributing much to society in any way, but I was building up some really good mental models and mindset things with the books that I was reading, the studying I could do. And I could read a book pretty much in about a day. At that time, I started experimenting with some ideas in those books, and I would go to the mall and I'd watch people and try not to judge them. I'd go with my brothers out on their job sites as they were running construction companies and different things, and try to think about, like, what are they doing that makes sense and what are they doing that's nonsensical. And I picked up a few tricks and tips, and I recognized and noticed some things. For instance, one of them is I started doing a to-done list, because I would see them complain and gripe about all the stuff they were doing, all the problems they had, yet some days I'd hang out with them from the beginning of the day to the end of the day, and their lives were pretty nice. You know, driving around in a brand new, nice truck. They'd go to lunch at a nice restaurant. They would go to a movie, matinee, and then go home at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and complain about how much work they had to do and how stressful it was. So I thought maybe that's a difference in perspective, because to me that seemed like a pretty good life. And if you just focused on all the good things you got to do instead of the 2 or 3 phone calls that you took that really frustrated you that day, maybe the attitude of gratitude would kind of offset some of that. And if you kept track of what you did instead of what you had to do, because I noticed, like one of my brothers, for instance, always had a yellow pad and he always wrote down everything he had to do. It was always full. He'd get 2/3 of the way done, and the next day he'd take that page, start what wasn't finished on the top of a new fresh page, and then add more to it. So it's like you got this feeling that nothing's ever really getting done. You're in this hamster wheel that just keeps spitting out yellow pages of crap you got to do every single day. So my thoughts were, if you just wrote down the things you did and not all that crap you had to do, maybe you'd feel better about stuff. So I experimented with that, and it was kind of a fun little phase. And thankfully, I was able to do that because I didn't really have any bills living with my mom. That's kind of what that chapter of my life brought, was just the opportunity to experiment, to think, to be a little weird, and to continue and finish kind of developing as a young person into more of a young adult. After about a year of that, I woke up one day and realized it's time to go. And just like that, I made a couple of phone calls and found somebody that was in my same small town and wanted to get out, and we found one of his brothers who lived in Vegas, and within a couple of days we moved in. So we had a place in Vegas. We were renting for just a bedroom out of his place for like $50 a month. It was nothing. It was a sweet deal. And I got this job in Las Vegas at a furniture store where I worked for a few months. And then one night I had a dream that I was pushing a beverage cart down the aisle of an airplane. And it never occurred to me in all of my life that that was a job that I could get. Like, just never pass through my brain at all. And I woke up that morning and thought, wow, that's interesting. So I picked up a paper and I looked for, that's what we had back then, to search for jobs. I got a newspaper and I looked and there were some job fairs for airlines. All of them required you have a resume. So I went and found somebody who did resumes, hired them, created a resume, and went to the next 6 job fairs. Rode the bus to all of them because I had no car. I had nothing. Quit the job at the furniture store, became a flight attendant, went through training, passed the training, took my first trip to the East Coast even before I officially started work, just in case I didn't pass the last test which you take on an airplane. I wanted to at least get some travel perk out of my job. So I jumped on a plane at night in Las Vegas at 11 p.m., flew to New York City, walked around the city by myself all day long, and got on a plane at like 6 o'clock at night and flew back to Las Vegas because I could do all that for free with my little airline badge. Then the next day I was tested on the workings of the plane, and if you didn't pass that test, you were fired. So like it was, you train for 6 weeks, then you have one, it's called an IOE, Initial Operating Experience, and that's the big test you have to pass. So I did pass, I worked that job, happily had a great time. It was a great job for a single straight man to have. And a company of about 400, I think, flight attendants. There was probably 30 or 40 men, and 3 of them were straight. And so there's pretty good odds for dating and pulling from those kind of numbers. This is where I met my wife. Within days after meeting her, that I just kind of grew instantly tired of the job and decided I'd move back and start going to college. Her idea of a good man was somebody who had a consistent job. She really wanted somebody that was like a dentist, you know, good, solid professional, goes to work at 8, leaves at 5, has a 401k. So I thought I could probably do that. I went to college, got a job in sales to fund my way through college. Definitely didn't like the 401k and the dentist thing. Learned some good lessons in college. Finally had to work at school for the first time. It wasn't just a cakewalk. Chemistry, particularly, that was hard. But I passed, I got through that, but I only went through a year. And that was kind of an interesting time of life because we had decided that maybe we should take some time apart. And then we found out we had a child coming. So we decided we better not take some time apart. Let's figure it out. The sales job that I had to put myself through college was something that I really took to quite quickly because I love psychology. I loved the books that I read when I was at my mom's, the tapes from my brother when I was 8 years old, they were all based in psychology and how the brain works and why we make decisions the way we do. So a job in sales, in high-ticket sales, was a perfect fit for what I liked to talk about. I loved pitching those programs because I didn't pitch any kind of program whatsoever. Like I tried to sound as much like Tony Robbins as I could on those calls. I would try to inspire and motivate people because of the desires they had in their heart, not try to sell some knick-knack or some package. And I loved it. We got married, moved to Las Vegas into a townhome, and I maintained that same job with sales. They opened an office in Las Vegas, and I was able to move down there with the same company and continue to make a good living where I didn't really have to work that hard and make good money. That's where bad choices started coming back into the picture again. Some paychecks were $5,000, and then this is 2002, and I'd get $5,000 for the week. There were droughts though, and sometimes I get $200 paychecks for the week. But in that environment, you are encouraged to incur a little more debt than you can handle, because if you have big car payments, you show up to work. There was also kind of a looking the other way for bad habits. And so some of those habits, because it's kind of monotonous to be in those same sales calls time after time, there's a lot of drug use there, and I fell right into that. I had a little bit of a tendency for that, if you recall. This time it was pain pills, which was a whole different animal. Seemed pretty harmless because, doctors prescribed them, but just 1 or 2 here and there turned into 1 or 2 every day, which turned into 1 or 2 every hour or 2, which turned into I can't function without them. Anybody who's experienced those kinds of opioid sort of dependencies, it's the worst thing biologically on earth. Like just what your body does when it's dependent, fully dependent. And I masked that addiction for years. 2-3 years. Was a functional sort of addict and a total secretive one. So I had 2 lives beginning to diverge. I had the one that my wife and child, where I was present for that sometimes. And then there was the one at work, that it was pretty open that many people were participating in this kind of drug use. So that began to take charge and overpower all of my thoughts, where the first thing you have to solve is if you're gonna have enough drugs for the day, for the week, Once that's done, then you can get to work. And so that's the problem with some of these addictions, is they just hijack all of your mental and emotional capacity, because it is the thing that you deal with first. So priorities are gone. You think that your priority is your family, there is no priority until you get the thing that you are addicted to. By definition, it means it is the priority. So we moved and life started changing. Different things happened. We went from Las Vegas to St. George, from St. George to northern Utah. I knew that the drugs were bad, and I knew that it was killing me, and I knew that it was pulling me away from what mattered most in my life. But I couldn't escape it there, so I thought if we just keep moving these places, maybe I can find better places to work, better. So as now a full-fledged addict, I'm trying to buy houses that are... So the habits of having too much debt, buying things beyond my means, those stuck. I carried those with me and then tried to mask the bad stuff with like this appearance of climbing a ladder. And it was really just going deeper into debt. Continually, my wife had these ideas that maybe she would like to have a dentist or a stable partner. You know, like, can't you just have a normal job? So those kind of things weighed on me a little bit. I had this addiction that I was trying to cover up and hide. Still, like just lying to her about what was going on, things that didn't add up, things that were kind of nonsense. I never could really get a different job because I was kind of a mess. But in sales, I knew how to sell, and it didn't really matter how high I was. So I could make sales. And sometimes definitely better than others. But I had this limiting belief that I needed the drugs to make sales. So got another job up in Salt Lake where I had to drive to and from work about an hour, and did well, did enough. Was able to support my family mostly with the sales commissions, but that's where the habits just started to fall off the rails because I was trying to juggle so much debt, trying to keep my lies up, trying to keep all these things going. As any good addict, just started to spiral out of control. And as I spiraled, my cars became less nice and they became more of an attractor for police. And then my life just continued to deteriorate. Choice after choice just led me to darker and worse places. I ended up in jail, not once, but 3 times in the course of just a few months, continually thinking that I could just mask it, cover it, lie about it. You know, maybe I'll let part of my story out, but not really let the full cat out of the bag. The first time I went to jail was just a quick stint. Second time I went to jail for like 10 days, and then I got bailed out. And then it was inside of a month that I went again. And this time, nobody was bailing me out. I think it was pretty apparent to pretty much everybody in my life that there was some serious things going on, and the things that were coming out of my mouth did not match the actions or the charges that were being brought up against me. I sat there for a couple of weeks this time and detoxed off of some pretty heinous and crazy drugs in jail with a shared cell with like 12 or 13 other guys. Absolute miserable situation, if you can even possibly imagine. And then I had a sobering encounter with the lawyer that my mother had paid for from the last time I had gone to jail, just a few weeks before that. He was talking to me on the phone through the glass, and he said, well, you know, if we get X, Y, and Z, and he started to line out like all these things that if this works, and if this works, and we convince the judge of this and this and this, then maybe you'll only do 3 or 4 years. And I was just like, whoa. Now I had 2 kids. I was looking at doing maybe 3 or 4 years, but the charges against me, having multiple charges so close together. Just in the last incident, I think I had like 15 or 18 years worth of charges brought up against me. And I said, Ed, I mean, I got a baby. I got a 2-year-old. I can't go to prison. What are you talking about? And he said, Justin, your got arrested twice in less than 2 months in school zones with this many drugs and this much stuff. Like, what do you think I can do about that? And I was like, wow. That's when I realized I'm not going to talk my way or lie my way out of this one. And I just started to plead with him, like, I don't know, but you have to do something. You've got to do something. You can't. Winning is not me going away for 3 years. Winning has to be somehow figuring this out to where I don't. And then he started to bake up an idea that maybe if we delay the trial date as long as possible, if during that time I'm perfect, I mean, 0 F-ups, and I go into a rehabilitation facility, like straight away from jail, maybe we can get leniency. And that was the plan that we began to execute. I went into rehab. I went for 6 weeks. We pushed the trial. We asked for continuances and different things. And sometimes I couldn't make it. He couldn't make it. All the while, I think we bought about 1.5 years from the time of the arrest to the time I actually went in for trial. I went into different hearings and just like, I'm doing good, I'm doing this, I'm into rehab, I'm into kind of a parole sort of thing. It was about 1 year between those 2 dates, and I was batting 1,000, totally clean, taking drug tests every week, randomly, sometimes 2 or 3 times a week. I'd lost all trust from everyone. So I had to build that back. Luckily, rehab taught me how to do that. It taught me not only how to use the systems and the frameworks to help me stay clear and to avoid the mindset traps and the limited beliefs that might trick me back into these stupid self-defeating behaviors, it also taught me how the people in my life that were more normal were going to look at me, kind of strengthen, toughened up my skin a little bit to where I could know coming out, I'm going to have a battle to climb and an uphill battle at that to regain that trust. One example of that, many examples with my wife and my family. One was with my brother. I was trying to catch a ride to this place where I was working long after rehab. I just walked miles to a gas station knowing that that's what I had to do. Waited at this gas station for somebody who was coming by to pick me up and take me 20 miles up the road where I was trying to get a ride to. And he was just convinced that me sitting suspiciously at a gas station, I must be waiting for my drug dealer to show up. And it was cool. I knew I wasn't there for that. He thought I was. And that was one of those small examples that I couldn't control what anybody else did, but I could always act with impeccability. My behavior could be beyond reproach. Their interpretation of it, I can't control. So, good lessons that came from rehab. I still use them today, every single day. During rehab, my wife began to liquidate everything. All of our finances were in shambles. Every credit card we had maxed out. Our home mortgage default was about to get foreclosed on. Car payments way past due. She began to sell and liquidate everything. Got the house sold just before we lost it. Was able to get enough of that to buy another car, a used car that at least could get her and the kids around safely. And then she stayed with a friend for a while until I got out of rehab and we moved into my mom's 2-bedroom house with 2 kids and slept on the floor. That was the situation that we dealt with for probably 6 months or so, 6-8 months. The strain and the difficulty that created and the challenge between my wife and I was just becoming untenable. What made this recovery even harder, maybe less speedy, is I didn't go get a job right out of rehab. I wanted to prove something. I wanted to try something. And that's one of the things I learned in rehab, that if I go get a dead-end, meaningless job, that is one of my key triggers that I'm going to go right back to doing the things that make me feel numb or better about myself working in some dead-end job. So I was committed and had the resolve that I'm going to work on building something myself and see if I can succeed. That sucked because we had no income and my wife is now working at Walmart making minimum wage to come home exhausted and sleep on my mother's living room floor. And I'm bringing in $0. I'm sure there's times she wanted to metaphorically kill me and maybe literally kill me to see if that would just alleviate some pain. It was becoming an emergent situation where I thought, if this doesn't get solved right now, our family's gonna break apart. These are not good feelings that I'm having. I know she's not having good feelings, and it's just gonna become like a battle. She takes the kids. This drug addict, he's probably not gonna be able to see the kids. So I thought I need to solve this problem now. I gotta fix this. So the next day I jumped in a car with a friend who was making a trip to northern Utah. I got in, started just going to the meetings he was going to and trying to think of anybody I could talk to. Inside of 2 weeks, we moved into a house, an 8,000 square foot house that I had met somebody who was a real estate speculator, bought a home, wanted to sit on it for a while, and if I helped him with some of his marketing, getting some leads for another business, he would let me live in this house rent-free. To make it even better, he actually put me on his company's health insurance policy, which was great because then 6 months later we got pregnant again. We're getting ready to have another baby. So we moved up north and moved into a home that we could call our own for a little while. And the business that I had been working on building began to take off. It started to work. It wasn't easy. I spent 20 hours most days working that business. I woke up dozens of times with the keyboard in my face. Worried that I had drooled into the keyboard and it wasn't going to work, and I couldn't afford to buy a new keyboard. It never happened though. It always kept working. So my focus was trying to improve our financial situation, and the odds were in my favor because I had no mortgage, had to pay power bill, like the basic utility stuff, but didn't have a house payment, didn't have a car payment. One of my other friends let me borrow his car, and I just drove around this car for free for months. Things were starting to come together, and then I paid off the smallest credit card that was about $1,300. Then I paid off the next credit card a couple months later, and that was about $3,000. Then I paid off a $7,500 credit card. Then I paid off a $13,000 credit card. And every one of those wins just kept feeling like I got more and more and more momentum. And then I went on payroll and I started paying myself regularly from my own business. And I was following some rules of paying myself 10% first before I did anything. So I took that money and I put it into a different bank account. And I had this ritual. Every time I printed a paycheck for myself, I would get into my car and I would drive over probably wasn't even my car to begin with. I'd drive over to a separate credit union, deposit the 10% from that, and then I'd take the rest of the check and drive it all the way over to a different bank just to go through this ritual of I'm willing to put the extra effort in to make sure I save the money. And this kept going, and I kept working on my marriage, kept working on the business, and kept trying to figure out how to balance all these things in life. The business continued to grow, and pretty soon I started to take stock. After spending I don't know how many Sundays trying to do bookkeeping, bad idea for me to do the books, I realized I was feeling some stress from this business that I didn't really want. And so I thought, if I started to look at some of the numbers and I calculated things and thought I could probably bring in about $200,000 a year after expenses if I just keep it at the level where I was like a month or two ago. So that's a pretty good income. If I can make a couple $100,000, $250, not have any employees, not have a bunch of stuff to manage, that's a great life. I can save a bunch of money, I can pay off our debt, we can start, rebuilding. I called some of my clients that I had at the time and said, yeah, I'm just need to dial things back just a little bit. And they met me with a quick and unequivocal, well, then we're going somewhere else. Like immediately. They didn't think, they didn't say like, oh, we understand. No, they're like, okay, you're done. I'm like, wait, never mind, just kidding. No, I'm good. Then I started to wonder, how can I grow? I felt like I was in over my head. I felt like I was getting into areas that was out of my depth. I started figuring out, like, how am I gonna do payroll taxes now? Like, I'm paying myself a paycheck, but I don't know how to do taxes. I'm gonna need to bring in help if I were to grow. I don't know how to do payroll for other people. And then now I'm dealing with them. And then I have to have like contracts and stuff. I'm 25, 26 years old at the time. I got kind of stressed out, but I was confident in my ability to grow the business. I just wasn't confident in all these other things. So I went and met with a friend, somebody that had helped me in times past, that I had a relationship. There was a relationship with the family, that it was a tight connection. And I began to break down over a meal on the back of napkins, kind of what I did, some of the revenue, and he said, you should come talk to me and my lawyers about all this because this sounds phenomenal. I think we can help you. So 2 days later, I went and met with a group of them, kind of recapped the whole thing on a big whiteboard this time. And over the next 3 months, we'd hired 6 people, brought our offices, his office and mine together, got a bigger office space, started to scale, created 2 new companies as a result to support the other company with some of the other services that we would need in order to grow. The next 5 years, we scaled at an incredible pace. We reached near $100 million within just a few years of gross revenue. Our profit margins were great, and our companies were making money. Some were making a couple $100,000 a year. Some were making $6 or $7 million a year. Things were going great, and we had a great relationship where I was doing the things that I was good at. I was maintaining the relationships, managing the accounts, and he was helping with the administrative, the finances, the legal, and all those things, and continually just helping me to stay in my lane where I excelled. And we were excelling at many, many things. Then one of our clients went into litigation. If I remember right, I think they might have gone into bankruptcy protection, and they left us on the hook for a $1.6 million receivable. So we were out all that money, and I made the decision that I wanted to pay all of our vendors on the money that we were out. Even though we weren't getting the income, I wanted to pay them because it was a commission-based thing where they had made all these sales, sold all these things, done all this marketing. And if we didn't pay them, our reputation would go down the drain. But that decision, while I would still do that again, was that moment that was the turning point that began our demise. This also happened to coincide with some of the banking collapses of, 2009, 8, 9, something? So one of our banks was taken over by the FDIC and went insolvent. Just the economy was kind of falling apart those days. And so with all of that going on, our clients not paying bills, this man who'd become my partner in so many of our business ventures and was a dear friend and we were like this. Now in hindsight, I could see that he was beginning to just claw back some of those resources and some of the assets and the cash in the bank. And maybe when I paid the $1.6 million out in payables, when we had no receivables to do that, he may have thought that was a bad move. Maybe that was a bad move. But within that 6 months that followed that was that lunch meeting where I was telling him that I needed just $600,000 of my money back in my account so that I could hire some people and give some peace of mind to my wife and kind of rebuild a few of the things that we had paused, shut down, and that went dormant because of all this economic turmoil that was taking place. When that money didn't come and when I pushed harder and he said, in response to the texts, I got nothing and there's no money to send, then I had to wait for the long flight for him to arrive in Hawaii. And when he landed, I got another text because I had sent him 10 probably while he was in the air. and there wasn't a lot of texting in the air then, he landed and said, I don't know what you're talking about. The money is all gone. I knew that there was millions of dollars that had been moved over into these other accounts just for safekeeping and protections, and that now I was basically just smoked. So here I was, we had shut down all the businesses, we were out all this money, and any of our old reserves had been moved off of the books. And then what ensued was a 5-year litigation that I'm not really one to pick a fight like that. I didn't have the stomach for it, but I was emboldened after meeting with a lawyer and reviewing some of the financial data that I had and could get my hands on, and said, okay, there was a tax attorney, meeting with a criminal attorney, and just going over the current state of affairs, that I was looking for some advice because these were attorneys that didn't have direct connections to this individual. And I said, well, here's all the stuff for the business. This is about what we made. The tax attorney said, well, it looks like you've got 2 options. One, you can just slip off and be quiet and hope nothing happens and hope that nobody ever looks at you. I said, well, what if they do? I said, well, if they do, you will probably go to prison for a long time, because just from some quick calculations, there's millions of dollars of taxes that you haven't paid that your business and you were responsible for. But the tax returns that were submitted that were forged with your signature by this other individual, they don't match any of the finances. So if anybody were ever to take even a little bit of a look, you are smoked. I thought, wow. Okay, what's the second option? She said, the second option is you file an amended tax return and you try to make it as good as you can, like as accurate as you can come up with the data to make it accurate. And you show that you have millions of dollars in tax debt that you owe, and then you plead with the IRS to give you time, and you spend the rest of your life paying it off. Maybe you never do, but you probably won't go to prison behind door number 2. So I had almost certainly go to prison if somebody looks, spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder hoping nobody ever looks, or go kick over the hornet's nest and jump right in the middle of it and then try to prove that it wasn't me that filed the tax return and I don't have like $10 million hiding somewhere underground that should have been taxed. Learning my lessons from the first go around, the last time that I almost went to jail 10 years prior, I said I don't want to be facing those kinds of consequences again. So I think I can get through anything, but I don't think I want to have my children grow up without their dad in their lives, or have their dad behind bars. So I began the process of filing amended tax returns and retaining lawyers and trying to figure out ways that I could get these lawyers paid and begin to build a case against somebody who had kept all the records, who had all the financial details, who had hundreds, turns out, of LLCs and other entities set up in various states and countries all over the world. And we began the tedious process of trying to prove through federal and state litigation that there was wrongdoing done on their hand and we had no part of it, and that we needed that money back to pay the federal government. What ensued over the next 5 years of litigation is the most amazing and unbelievable and crazy twists and turns. Legal fees alone were millions of dollars. Before there was a resolution to the case, I had liens against my house for the legal fees because I was months behind. We had the insurance company for the CPA firm that he had used to prepare the taxes settle with us for $750,000, which gave us a little bit of runway, but surprisingly, that ran out in only a few months. We were just weeks away from a trial date when some miracles took place in my life. I was able to somehow come up with the courage to go against the entire legal team that had worked on this case for 4 years plus and tell them that I wanted to pursue a different course of action. They all told me how foolish I was, and this has been like my job for 4.5 years. I woke up in the morning on Monday, I started reading a stack of legal briefs or depositions this big, marking them up, cross-referencing old emails, looking through files that we'd obtained from Discovery, marking them, noting them, making copies, making voice memos, sending them over to a legal team. Doing this all from the quiet solitude of a tiny place in Vermont so that I wasn't anywhere close to the toxicity of what I was dealing with. Trying to find some semblance of peace. and I learned how to meditate. I learned how to clear my mind. I learned how to forgive. I learned how to move on. And those were things that they kept like working and keep working in my life from those episodes. Then these miracles started to take place there at the end. I woke up one day and it was August. And I had moved to Vermont because of the peace and the tranquility that I felt there. And I felt it because of our trips that we would take as a family with my little kids, and we'd go see the fall colors in Vermont, and we'd watch the leaves change, and we'd go get donuts and apple cider, and we'd have all these fun times. One more October was about to come. The last 4 Octobers, I was chained to my desk. I was stressed. I was worried. I didn't have the time. I didn't have the space or the clarity to go enjoy those things. And I woke up one day and said, I am done with this. I will enjoy this October. We will live this October like we did years ago when we had thriving businesses and I wasn't in litigation up to my eyeballs and I wasn't about to lose my mind. That's somehow exactly what happened. Through a miraculous turn of events, we were able to settle all of the cases, and there were multiple cases, because when I filed one suit, he would file 3 back against me. He would sue my friends, he would sue my neighbors, he would sue anybody on hand, so that I had to defend not only myself, but them and everybody else. It was a war of attrition there, and everything was gone in the next 6 weeks. And by the latter part of September, all cases were settled. And with some twists and turns with the IRS, I had some nasty phone calls and inspections from them. Submitted over 180 pages of evidence to them that all my assets, everything I've ever owned, any bank account I'd ever set up in the previous 10 years, they are thorough. Turns out taxes aren't so complicated when you owe them money. It's pretty straightforward. They want it, they'll do anything to get it. And they have some pretty good leverage on you. But again, before October began, the case was closed. Everything was dropped. We had settled. And my tax debts were paid off in full. And how that happened was purely by the grace of God. That gave me a big sigh of relief. We did enjoy that October. Things were good. We just kind of went about living our lives and then had a vacation set up after that to go to Hawaii. While in Hawaii in January, I had another thought occur to me one morning when I woke up and was just kind of hanging out with the sun rising, coming up over the mountains and lighting up the ocean. I thought, I wonder what it'd be like to live here, just be like a local. As I watched some local guy drag his surfboard down to the beach. And then we went back home, had a fun vacation, went back home to Vermont, and that idea just kept gnawing at me. And so I worked on it and mentioned it to my wife and said, what do you think? It'd be cool to just go there. I'm kind of tired of being here and working. I don't have this work to deal with anymore. I called a couple places and I said, I want to come live there for a while. What was the process be like? Could you rent something for 6 months? What's the deal? And the people there responding, the people that owned the condos or managed the properties or whatever, they're like, yeah, when are you thinking? I'm like, next week? Does that work? And they're like, maybe in a year. Everybody said the same thing. Are you nuts? No, you don't do that. And then I got to call number 6 or 7, and the person said, would you move in the middle of the 6 months, to another condo if you had to? I'm like, yeah, that's no big deal. Yeah, we can figure it out. Within a week, my whole family was back in Vermont. And to make that happen, we had to get our kids out of school. We had to bring somebody over to watch the dog, move into our house. My sister came out. All these things just changed and moved, and we lived this life of 6 months on Maui. And it was fantastic. We draw to the end of that period of time. It was the beginning of July, and the island was starting to get a little bit busier because people were coming for summer break, and it's like we had such a great time, but it was feeling a little different for us, and we didn't really want to stay there anymore, but we didn't want to go home either. We were thinking well, what are we going to do? And we were sitting on the beach, my wife and I talking, the kids were playing, and I said, we've never been to Europe. Maybe we take a trip. We didn't have our passports with us. They were back in Vermont. We're like, that could be fun, but I don't know. There's all that. What do we do? Where would we go? I don't know. That night we went and we just searched up Europe travel. And there was an ad for the Eurail pass. Get a 3-month pass for Eurail so we looked, and if you ship the pass to a US address, it's much cheaper. If you buy it in Europe, it was going to be more. And I didn't understand that, but I thought, I'm just going to buy it. Our lease was over in the condo on the 7th. We had made we went to a friend's house on July 4th for a barbecue. And they're like, what are you going to do? I don't know. We don't have any plans. On the 5th, we bought the Eurail pass. And on the 6th, my neighbor overnighted the passports to us. And on the 7th, we got on a plane and went to Oslo, Norway. One-way ticket. We had an overnight layover in Seattle. Got to Oslo the next day. Ended up spending the next 6 months traveling around Europe. So that turned into different train trips, and we went in, 16 countries. and just went from one place to the next. If we liked a place, we'd extend. We'd go again. We'd stay a little longer. If we didn't like a place, so we went all the way from Norway, up Norway, down Norway, through Denmark, and all the way down to Italy and France. And then down there, it was like late August. It was busy. People were just finishing up their summer vacations before going back to school. And they weren't as nice to us as they were in Norway. So we're like, let's go back to Norway. So we made our way all the way back. We went all the way back up to Norway. Just took months throughout that process. Ended up catching a flight over to stop over in Iceland for a few days. That was kind of cool. And then came home. After coming home from such an awesome adventure, a year gone now. Time with my kids, I remember my family. Some of my siblings were like, you should wait until your kids are older when they can remember it. Now my kids are older. And I am so grateful that I took the time to do that with my kids while they were young, while they wanted to be with me, while the social pressures and other norms of society hadn't kicked in yet. It was just, it's precious. It's absolutely some of the best moments of our lives are just so meaningful and impactful that we covered the globe, and it was awesome. After that, things started to shift in my life. And after surmounting such a peak and going through so much turmoil, I didn't have that turmoil anymore. I was involved in a couple of businesses, but I didn't do tons of things in there. I wasn't actively employed in the business, so I was just a partner in these businesses. Almost by accident, like going through this whole process of litigation, I started bringing in accountants and different people to do books and records, and I had friends asking me, like, could you help me with my payroll? Could you do our books for us? So we started doing a few people's like that just to help offset some of my payroll costs while I was dealing with litigation. And that just kept growing and growing. Their friends recommended their friends and their friends and so on. And so pretty soon we're doing 50 different companies' payroll, books, records, the whole admin, 9 yards. But I didn't do much of that other than just some strategy. I'd help them overcome some blocks and just work on how to grow or how they could delegate more effectively or what tasks they should give to the admin team and what tasks they need to keep inside and make their primary focus and their main priority. And I like doing that part of it, but I did not like doing the books part of it. But because I'm not an accountant, I didn't have like a day-to-day job. And so I took my kids to school every day. I did a lot of things with my family, but in hindsight, what started happening at that time, which is around 2016, I didn't have something to work towards. I wasn't striving to do anything. And that saying, which I knew, and I've probably said 1,000 times before that even happened, is if you're not growing, you're dying. And I started dying. I started to slide. I started to drift, really drift. I mean, I put on 40 pounds over the next year or two. I was working on nothing. I would do the minimal. Like I spent all the time with kids and family and neighbors and all that, but I used it as an excuse. I used that as a way to just kind of cope with, I'm not exerting myself. I'm not building anything. I'm not contributing anywhere. But I took solace in the fact that, I take my kids to school every day. I'm there when they get home from school every single day. We go on vacations. I go to their baseball games. I drive around. I contribute. I donate. I volunteer with all these things. But it was really just to avoid this voice inside of me. Now as I'm saying this out loud, like I should have known better from rehab. That if I'm not working on something, if I'm not trying to solve something, if I'm not trying to contribute to build something, I get in trouble. And man, I got in trouble. And it was after COVID, which in New England, COVID was quite the lockdown situation. And I'm dealing with all the trauma that my kids are going through. I've got one in her senior year of high school. I got one in 4th grade, 3rd grade, elementary school. And the differences of trying to do remote stuff with masks and different setups in this house to have space to do work, it was bananas. And then I started just to take a look at myself and realize I'm not good. Like I'm not healthy. I'm not succeeding at pretty much anything, Thank goodness I had a bit of a wake-up call. And I even remember taking some pictures of myself in the bathroom going like, this isn't good. I've never looked like this. and there was a little bit of me thinking, maybe these will be a before and I'll get an after. But there was a bigger part of me thinking like, what's the point? Like it was just, I'm old, I'm fat, I don't have anything to do. But we started to shake things up. We started to move around. My wife wanted to get out of there. She was a driver of that. She knew things were wrong. She knew things weren't right in our marriage, in my life. I luckily, thankfully, by the grace of God, I started getting to different rooms. I had a friend who co-founded a project that helps kids with their mental health in schools, and they deal with schools, and he called me and said, do you want to help us with the sales and marketing angles? We're not able to get into these schools effectively. And so I started to work on something that had some meaning behind it, and I got excited by it. That got me out of the East Coast and out of my house, and I flew out to the West Coast a couple of times to work on that project. That project led me into some other projects, and that got me into different rooms, and I started hearing people speak. Some of them I'd known, like Tony Robbins, all the way back from 8 years old, but I hadn't been practicing or listening or reading or working on those things in the interim. I got into rooms with him, and then I met other mentors and teachers. And then I actually paid for mentoring, for coaching. Thought, I'm gonna work on some stuff and maybe I could use a kick in the pants, and boy, did I need it. I didn't even realize how much I needed it, which is kind of the point of good coaching, I guess. Just overcoming some of the roadblocks. And that episode helped me to begin to get clear, and I recognized that even after I knew there was something wrong, I wanted to get back and start building something, I went about it the wrong way. I had this habit from way back when, before all the lawsuits. The last experience of successful business that I had in my mind that I'd been a part of, we had like 12 business entities operating. They were all doing good. Some of them were doing kind of good. Some were doing really good. And so every time there was an idea that passed an initial litmus test of scrutiny, it was like, set up an entity, let's form it, let's work on it, let's give it 6 months, let's give it $100,000, let's see if it works. I had scorecards and I had metrics and I had people that could work on them and dedicate 2 hours from him and 6 hours from him a day and yada, yada, yada. Well, I came into 2022 or whatever with that same idea. I came in thinking, oh, let's try this, let's try this, let's try this, let's try this. So I went from nothing and 1 employee to 10 employees, 5 different business ideas, all of us running around like schizophrenic, crazy people, spending 1 hour going this direction and then 1 hour going this direction and then wondering why we're right back where we started 2 hours later. It's because we were diluting our efforts and our energies. And I had to do some looking inside and letting go and realizing some of the work that I had been doing, like the bookkeeping company, the payroll stuff, it's not what I do. It's not what lights me up. I'm not an accountant, for hell's sake, so I don't even know why I was doing it. But I really do like helping people understand their books, because I've been on the side of bookkeeping that I've known nothing and just been like, I don't know, you guys take care of it. And I know what that cost me. Probably about $20 million, to be honest, plus all the legal fees in the 5 years of my life. So maybe add that to the price tag. And I've been on the other side of actually learning how to read those numbers, learning what they mean, and learning how to make them work for me. You know, like, I don't need to get into QuickBooks or some other sophisticated accounting software, because I'm never going to want to be that guy. I'm not going to learn. I don't want to know. But can I get a report that somebody can generate from that gives me all the data points, the dashboard, the details, so that I can balance and audit the bank account against that report and make sure that the money in and the money out matches with what I expect? Can I get that and know where I need to trim fat, where I need to invest more, where I should double up my energies? Yes. All those things are possible without becoming an accountant. So I do like working with people there. And through the process of some self-discovery and maybe pulling my head out of my rear end and having some good coaching to help me do that and being in good rooms with people that reminded me of what was possible again. And that's one thing that I took away all those years of bookkeeping. Like, there were the bookkeepers and there was the accountants, and they did a good job of taking care of all the bills and getting the P&Ls out and filing the quarterly tax returns and all that stuff. I never had any part of that. They were fully competent and capable and did an excellent job. That's why I hired them. My part of that company was to lead that company and to drive some business results forward, but also to work with all of the clients and help them unlock the limiting beliefs that they had around their numbers or around their growth or around their potential. And I love that part of it. Those consulting calls that I would have with our clients over those years were my favorite calls. But I was so enmeshed in the details and the drama of the human resources. And then I hired all these people, and now there's all these resources I got to manage and think about. And we're losing money hand over fist so fast. I didn't see the forest for the trees. And again, thankfully, through good coaching and mentoring and being in the right rooms, I started to realize I got way too much going on. I got to start saying no. I got to shut off things that are draining and drawing my time and attention away so that I can go all in on one thing. Because what happened to me 20 years earlier, 10 years earlier, when I saw success, I didn't have 5 things going. I wasn't diversifying or having multiple things. I went all in. I worked 20 hours a day on one thing. I got really good at one thing, and that one thing got me out of debt. That one thing paid for a 15,000 square foot house. That one thing hired 100 employees. That one thing begat 2 other entities that also begin to generate income and revenue. And then those created more. So those 100 employees were there, and they had sweet, smart people that could help me manage, smarter than me, that could run all the operations, that could keep track of the details. It wasn't because I had 12 things that made me successful. I had one thing that became successful that leveraged other opportunities through cash flow, through human resources, through reputation, through reach, through opportunities that came seeking me out because of the success I had in one thing. Thankfully, to my mentors and coaches, I was reminded of that, and I've been able to since eliminate all of the distractions, cut off all the other businesses, reduced our team to just a handful of key people that are fully drinking the Kool-Aid on the mission that we have. Well, once I got over the fear of trying to get on camera and actually share all these vulnerable details like I am right now, which that took me like 2 years. That was not an easy thing after living in seclusion and becoming fat in the seclusion for so many years. Once I started overcoming that fear, we just love it. We get to help entrepreneurs every day that are blocked. Some of them are 20, some of them are 60, and we all run into similar problems. And sometimes that little different perspective just lets you see things in a different way, or a tactical piece of advice that you need just to attack this one thing can just jump you light years ahead so much faster than sitting there trying to figure it out on your own. If you made it this far, thanks for listening to my story. I'm so happy to be here, and I'm so happy to work with other business owners because I think entrepreneurs are some of the smartest, most capable, most dedicated and resilient, gritty that are out there in this world. They will take a shot on anything. You got to understand that sometimes that goes against you though. If you have one person that you're thinking about hiring and you don't know how to hire properly, you'll take that shot on that one person. You'll put lipstick all over that pig because you think, I can make it work. Because that's what entrepreneurs do. They make things work. They take what the rest of society doesn't want to deal with, doesn't have the patience or the knowledge or the wherewithal or just the will to deal with and to jump into, and they do with both feet, blindfolded most of the time. And they create an existence that is not yet here. So kudos to all of you that are out there. And if there's anything that I can do to help support you, that can drive you and your creativity, your business, your vision forward out into the world, don't hesitate to let me know. And you go be the best 10.0 version of yourself because you got a lot to share. And don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Thanks for listening. Peace.